Hi there. Welcome to Bourbon Turntable. We are the show that blends the love of music with the love of whiskey. With me tonight, as always, is my good friend Drew Crowley. Drew, how are you?
I'm doing well, sir. How about yourself?
I'm doing really well. It was a good weekend. Got to travel down to Tennessee, visit with my dad yesterday. He was doing great, and that's always good to catch up with him and see what all he's got going on. For a man in his early 80s, he stays busy.
Excellent. I'm glad to hear that.
Yes, I am too. Every time I call him, he's not home, so that's a good sign. That's a really good
Awesome.
sign. But no, he's doing well, and it's always fun to catch up with him. How about you? Anything special this weekend?
Yeah, not a ton at the time that we're recording this, just a little behind the scenes thing. I just returned from a trip home to Oklahoma to see my folks.
Hmm.
So got to visit with my grandparents, both of whom are in their later 80s. So it's always good to get to spend some time and a couple hours with them and see my parents and all the kids that still live at home. I got to see my little niece turn 2. So that was fun and hear all of the wonderful words that she has already learned and maybe teach her a couple of four-lettered ones myself. So successful trip, and I'm glad to be back in Kentucky.
Oh, good, 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 good. Well,
Yeah.
we've got a really fun show for everybody today. We have Paul Tomaszewski here with us from MB Roland. We're big fans of what he is doing down there, and his wife Mary Beth's in the background there, so maybe we'll hear a little bit from her as well. But before we dig into things with Paul, we want to tell you about Bar Cart Co-op. Bar Cart Co-op is a collection of friends who produce content for the whiskey enthusiast. We have Distillers Talk with Alan Bishop and Christy Atkinson. They talk with distillers from across the country and around the world about unique distillation techniques. And if you are more interested to learn about what's in that glass that you have, how that whiskey got there, this is a great show for you. You can learn a lot. Speaking of learning a lot, Alan also has a show he calls One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute. If you are a distiller legally or illicitly, you can email Alan questions and he'll post YouTube video responses to those questions. Uh, My Whiskey Den is with Pat and Mike and Mitch. That show is every Monday night, 9 o'clock Eastern, 8 o'clock Central. My Whiskey Den is where craft whiskey is king. Always a fun time there. I think Paul was on that show recently as well. So be sure to check those guys out every Monday night. And then our show, well, we'll let a friend tell you a little bit about that.
All right. Don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, hit the bell notification to find out when new episodes come out, which is every Wednesdays on all of your streaming services everywhere. Apple, Spotify, whatever other ones there are, and the YouTube where you can watch the live recording itself.
Thanks, Mike. We appreciate your contribution to the show every time. So, Paul, welcome to Bourbon Turntable.
Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for being with us. We really appreciate it. And the first thing I want to ask is did I butcher your name or did I get it right?
No, it does not look like it's spelled or sound like it looks. There you go. It's Tomaszewski, kind of like Chevrolet.
Tomaszewski. All right. Well,
Right.
now I know. I should have asked that before. I apologize. I guess I'm probably not the first one to mess it up, but it may not be the last. But I apologize for that.
Yeah, well,
But
it's also the reason why it's named MB Roland too.
Checks out.
that
Checks
does
out.
check out. Well, tell us about yourself a little personally. How did you get to where you are now before you got into distillation?
I definitely went the unconventional way, or obviously the entrepreneurial way.
Mhm.
But looking back now, the skill sets and everything that led to the distillery. In my background, I was in the military here
Mhm.
at Fort Campbell. I say here because our
Sure.
distillery is located. You can basically see any planes that fly into the airfield here because of how close we are. And that's how I got to the area. I'm originally from the New Orleans area, and got to Fort Campbell, met Mary Beth. And whenever I talked her into this whole distillery plan, this is where we decided to set up. But the military background helped out more so from the going through the regulatory side of things to get the operation started than anything. And just feeling comfortable working with the government, because I'd done that for several years beforehand.
Well, thank you for your service, first of all.
Yes.
We appreciate that. How long were you in the service?
Well, I was technically in really 5 years it depends on how you want to say it. Some people might correct me how I say this, but I was in active Army for 9 years. But 4 of those, the first 4 was at the U.S. Military Academy, so it's not like I was in harm's way or anything like that. But the 5 years after that was, active regular Army, infantry, and technically cavalry as well.
Wow. How did you get interested in distilling?
I didn't have a hobby. When I was in the Army, I never really had a home because I was always moving. I mean, you hear that a lot, but particularly with myself, I was single, and it was in the throes of all of the deployments after 9/11. So I was coming and going at all times. I think the longest I lived at one place was, as far as an actual residence in any one time, was 2 months.
Wow.
But it was fun. It was fun, and I did it the right way. I didn't have a whole lot of baggage to pull around during the process. But I mean, it was a lot of movement, a lot of going around. I went everywhere from Georgia to Fort Lewis, Washington, so all over the country, and of course here at Fort Campbell. But I'm sorry, I lost track of the question. What was the original question?
How did you get into distillation?
Distillation. Okay. Well, so I remember very vividly when I was in the Army. My brother at the time was in the Navy, and I was at Fort Lewis, Washington, which is over there by Seattle, for those that aren't familiar with it. And I figured out that I could, for $40, get on an airplane when I had some time off and fly to Japan and go visit my brother on a Space A flight. So I took advantage of that. And in Japan, at the particular place he was stationed, they had some very good selections of whiskey in their Class 6. And of course, duty free, because it was overseas. And so we bought a few bottles of what we felt was extremely low priced whiskey. And I'd never really tried to drink whiskey that much. Luckily, I'd never done shots. I think that's my biggest skill set, is I never went the wrong way with whiskey. But we just started sipping on stuff. And as I started looking into it for fun, just, well, how the heck is this made? It fascinated me. And I kind of looked at the experience of watching craft breweries really grow up or be more of a force in the market by the time I was in my 20s, and said, why isn't whiskey doing this, or why isn't distilling really doing this? And it was almost like a project that I just gave myself when I was finishing up my time in the Army, to come up with a business plan and see if I could put something together that would work. And it mostly was accurate, I guess. There were some changes, but the interest in the actual distilling, that was the easy part. The making side of it, we've fundamentally been the same ever since we came up with our original process and products. But I kind of look at if you have a love for food and beverages and things like that, that's really the skill set you need to appreciate whiskey production and making it. I was always playing in the kitchen as a kid, baking things. I still like to bake things every now and then, but I mean, it's just kind of a normal atmosphere for me. And I always say that the distillery, at least our distillery, to me is like a bakery rolled into a family farm.
Mm.
Now, you grow all the grains that you use on your farm?
No. Well, when I say farm, we are we're not a farm operating, growing anything or having cattle. We're just kind of a farm atmosphere with the distillery and the grain. We do have some corn planted on our land, but it's the same folks that we buy it from, and they farm it. Okay. I like to say that we're distillers, we're not farmers. We're one sidestep from a farmer, particularly in our area, because all of our neighbors are farmers, and we're in the middle of all this farmland. But we focus on making the whiskey, not so much the growing of it. But the folks that are multi-generational farmers, in most cases, let them be the subject matter experts and do it right. But we get very good grain from them.
Yeah,
awesome.
Well, we've got a lineup of whiskeys that we're going to try tonight. We're going to start with the one on the right, the corn whiskey, and what I actually have here is actually a single barrel pick from Westport Whiskey and Wine that is pretty stellar. But so tell us a little bit about the corn whiskey, and while we take a sip or two.
Well, I have to shamelessly plug that this one, this whiskey was one of the two, this one in Barker's Mill, that we submitted to the Ascot Awards, and it was our first whiskey competition we sent any whiskey to in the almost 15 years we've been in business. And this corn whiskey won, well, not the one you're drinking, that's a single barrel, but
right.
But this corn whiskey won gold as well as best in category. And we're really proud just because of the
competition.
Yeah, competition. There's some good competition of corn whiskey going.
Right.
Now. But this was always a product that I personally wanted to make for the distillery, because everything with our production is kind of tied to pre-prohibition techniques and styles and everything. Mm-hmm. And corn whiskey was more of a developed category back then. A lot of distilleries made their own brand of corn whiskey. And, it's all this Scotch and Irish whiskey being made with used barrels. Mm-hmm. Our stuff certainly can be a good product that way too. So we use local white corn that's all grown here within, a few miles of the distillery. It's all food grade corn that we were so fortunate to have access to whenever we opened. That was just a great supply that is kind of unique to have access to that. And it's the same stuff used for grits and for making tortillas and things like that.
Okay.
And this particular mash on this is 95%, so it's really meant to stand up the white corn in the mash bill. And to me, it's kind of just softer, gentler, even though it's barrel proof, because all of these whiskeys, the bottled and bond for Barker's Mill, of course, are barrel proof the way we do it. And the corn whiskey at 115, I think it drinks, a little bit better than that as far as the ABV, but it's just kind of mellow, not trying to hit anyone's head or anything like that. Kind of soft, easy going, And we're drinking this one first. I call corn whiskey my closer, because that's kind of like, if I'm drinking a few drinks in one sitting, I finish with the corn whiskey as my way to kind of shut things down, turn things off.
Yeah.
It's a nice, easy, softer kind of pour to have.
You're coasting into a landing.
Mm-hmm. But I'm starting with the coast on this one, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we're just
Wow.
getting warmed up with this one. Drew, what do you think, man?
Well, yeah, I was just gonna say it's a fascinating nose. And is this used cooperage or brand new cooperage? I apologize for not doing my research ahead of time.
No, it's a great question. Corn whiskey is, I call it the black sheep of the whiskey family because we make a lot of different varieties of whiskey. And it's the only straight whiskey compared to bourbon, rye, etc., that is required to be aged in a used barrel or a toasted barrel. And we're using our used bourbon barrels for our
Got it.
purpose.
Okay. No, the only reason I asked that and I just wasn't clear on it is because I don't perceive a ton of oak influence, although it is there. So the corn kind of comes up as the number one thing, almost like the stereotypical movie theater buttered popcorn. But then this back end has a really nice complexity to it. I almost get kind of a tobacco note. And then on the finish, it reminds me a little bit of, you guys know those gas station peach rings, the peach candies that you get? There's like
Yeah.
little gummy candies. So I don't know if that's coming from a yeast strain or if that's coming from the oak as well, but there's just really nice kind of stone fruit sweetness on the back end. So I really like this one, and we've tried quite a few corn whiskeys on this podcast and whatnot, and this one has a complexity that I really enjoy between the dark and kind of the fruity note. So really, really good. I'm gonna enjoy this for a minute.
Yeah, there's I get some honey on it,
Mm.
and I agree. The grain certainly shines through without a doubt. But I get a little honey, maybe a little graham cracker, a little bit of pepperiness on the finish, and then that tobacco. Is it aged in a dark fired bourbon barrel or
No, these
No.
are going to be regular barrels.
regular barrels?
Yeah, it might be different recipes of bourbon, but it's going to be bourbon barrels.
Okay. Yeah, it's very, very good. And yeah, I think you mentioned the competition in this segment is pretty stout and getting more so. What do you see as the future for corn whiskey?
I think it'll have a little bit more of a defined category as far as products as time goes by, but it's always going to be a little bit of a niche category with, obvious understanding of the product and how it's the volume, or at least from my standpoint, the volume that's made compared to bourbon is nowhere. I mean, it's way less than rye, I'm sure.
That's an on-premise love, though.
Yeah, it's got some bar and restaurant love. That category in particular, though, I noticed that.
Yeah, and I think that it's a segment. Corn whiskey and American single malt are two areas that I think are going to we're going to continue to see some growth in here in the United States. But I think this is fantastic. How long have you been making the corn whiskey? How long is it a brand or a variety that you started out with early on, or is this something that you've added to your lineup?
Well, we didn't start that early because we didn't have used barrels to refill initially. But so it was a few years into the opening of the distillery, 3-4 years in, that we really started making a certain amount of corn whiskey. And then we've grown that proportional to our production a little bit more so because just having more access to used cooperage and seeing the evolution of this category, and we kind of feel like we're on the front end of it because we've been making it for a little bit. So we've got a little bit of whiskey to play with compared to maybe some other folks out there that are just not.
Yeah. Is all of your barrel storage there on site, or do you have to go off site for any of that?
No, all of our storage is on site.
Yeah.
We just did a big project for us, but depending on the size of an operation, this is a little tiny project for some places. But we put in a 4,000 barrel aging warehouse
Wow.
And it's taking care of us. We can add a little bit more rack spaces over time as we grow into it, but that'll take care of what we need for a minute.
Good.
That's fantastic. Yeah, that's super exciting.
How many barrels do you guys have resting right now?
We're about 15. It's actually a little bit more than that. Somewhere 1,500, 2,000 world in that neighborhood. We'll be at about 2,000 at the end of the year.
Terrific. What type of still do you use?
We use 2-pot stills, and we kind of had them custom made by a gentleman I knew in the distilling industry. He got into it as a fabricator because he had some unique skill sets and real good understanding of distillation. And he's out of Maine is where he made these. But he kind of made stills for a few operations like us in a way to fund his own little distillery operation that he has in Maine, little craft distillery. But the guy's name is Jesse Lupo, great guy. His distillery, shameless plug, is Mossy Ledge in Etna, Maine.
Okay.
And but he made these stills. We've had them now for 10 years, and they're doing great. But both pots, a 600 and a 300 gallon still, and that's how we run everything here.
Yeah.
Very cool.
It's always interesting, and the folks at Vendome do great work and have stills around the world. But it's always interesting to hear from folks that have stills that have a little bit more of an interesting story, and that definitely is interesting. I was up in Maine, I don't know, a year or two ago, and did not know that distillery was there, so that's good to know. And does he make stills for others as well, or is that just kind of a one-off project for him?
No, he made stills for a few other operations, smaller operations like us. Limestone Branch has one of those stills as well.
Oh, okay.
Awesome.
But there's a few of theirs out there. But he kind of folded the manufacturing side of his business once he was able to start his distillery. So it was kind of a bridge for him to get to that point.
Yeah.
And real unique individual. I think he was in the hydrogen, some kind of hydrogen pressurized line world before he got into making his stills. So he had some really good understandings of pressure and code and things like that.
Yeah.
So for him to make a still was actually not that big of a deal compared to what he was doing for his day job.
Oh, wow.
The choice to use white corn, that I mean, I know of some craft distillers that use that, but that's typically not what you see being used for corn used in a mash bill. How did you come to using white corn?
We were just right place, right time, to be honest with you. We in 2009, when we purchased the property and got the distillery up and running, it was an Amish dairy farm, and they basically were moving on to a different community in Indiana, and because of them selling and moving out, they had to sell outside of the Amish community. And so we happened to be talking to their real estate agent, and the real estate agent calls me up and says, "Hey, you need to go check this out. This is in a good spot. It's right off the interstate. This will work out well for you. There's a few buildings on site I think you can use." And I checked it out, and I was like, "This is perfect. This is great." I mean, it was everything he said and a little bit more in some ways. But when it came time to start finding grain and nailing down exactly how we wanted to make the product and supplying it, drove down the road to our granary where we get all of our grain from. It's 5 miles away, and started talking to the owner, who's also a farmer. And he said, when I was explaining to him what I was looking for, he said, I think you probably want white corn because that's what the moonshiners buy. And come to find out, the white corn that they had is kind of a unique situation. You can't go up to most granaries and say, hey, give me food grade white corn that's ready to go. It's just super unique, and didn't really understand that at the time. Now definitely do, but it was just great to get in on that. And I mean, you look at the research of old distilleries back in the day, and a lot of them obviously using pot stills. I think E.H. Taylor was using white corn and pot stills, and a lot of the older, smaller distilleries specifically had those go-to grains that they controlled the growth of, or they might have grown themselves as well. And having this white corn has just been one of our greatest resources of this location. We're in Christian County. For those that aren't familiar with the geography of Kentucky, or if you are, we're in Western Kentucky, closer to Nashville. And our county is actually consistently the number one crop producing county in Kentucky. So a lot of grain is grown here, very agricultural community. And the having access to this white corn is just very unique.
Let's get into the Barker's Mill, and Drew, while you're pouring that, I think most of the other whiskeys that you produce that I'm familiar with are branded as MB Roland. Why Barker's Mill?
Well, this is a product that I think we plan to make it at least 5 years ahead of time. But I mean, we talked about wanting to make a bottled and bond for quite some time, but we didn't want to do it until we had a certain amount of whiskey to dedicate to it. And what we ended up coming up with as far as how we wanted to produce this product was, this is specifically a wheated bourbon recipe. And unlike our MB Roland branded products, all of the MB Roland, if you see MB Roland for a whiskey product on a bottle, it's going to be barrel proof. It's going to be uncut and unfiltered. And if it's a single barrel, it'll be one barrel, but otherwise it'll be a blend of 10, 15 barrels or so. But those products are all unfiltered or rather barrel proof. Bottled and bond, obviously, you're cutting it to 100 proof. And in our case, we cut it down, from 108 or whatever we dump it at to 100 proof. But it's unfiltered as well, so it still has a lot of the good mouthfeel and oils and viscosity that you get with not chill filtering.
Yeah.
But it's a different animal when it's a bottled and bond, as we have now kind of figured out. When you're kind of call a bottled and bond almost like an estate bottling, because you're obviously pulling barrels from just a short little blip of your production, compared to all of our MB Roland products. You're going to have different ages in there, barrels from different seasons all over the place. You're blending the batch for flavor purposes. Whereas bottled and bond, you're trying to use obviously just the barrels from that 1 6-month lot. We call it Barker's Mill because we're actually on Barker's Mill Road. At least for now, we're about to change our address only because we're changing our driveway entrance. But Barker's Mill Road leads to the old Barker's Mill site a few miles down the road from us. And it was an old mill operation that had a few stills on site. Best example to give would be like kind of a local, probably much smaller version of the George Washington Distillery in but that same kind of business model where you had your mill and it was a place where everyone brought grain to and bartered and everything. And it never took off and turned into a standalone distillery operation, but it was kind of a way to, show that in our part of the state, in our area, you did have some distillery history. And consequently, now that we're changing our address to the other driveway, it's great that we decided to name this Barker's Mill so that we get to keep that involved with our business somehow. But it's a fun product. I mean, it's a little different. I don't drink Barker's Mill near as much as some of our other products, just because I'm not as heavy on wheated bourbons compared to bourbon with rye. It's just a personal thing more than anything.
Yeah.
Is there any of that old mill that is still around?
The mill is not around, but the stone foundation for the mill is still there.
Okay.
And actually, the picture on the label, and I got to shamelessly plug we got a gold medal on this too from the Ascot Award. But this picture on here on the label is Barker's Mill. It was based off of a picture that was taken not long before the mill was torn down or fell down, went down, however you want to say it, in the 30s, early 40s. And it's the stone foundation that was hand chiseled stones from super late 1700s, very early 1800s. All of that is still there. You can see it sitting right there on the side of the river as it would have been positioned. The oldest smokehouse in the county is right there as well. I think it was built in like 1810.
Oh, wow.
So this area was settled just like the rest of Kentucky for the most part in the late 1700s.
Well, Drew, what do you think of the Barker's Mill?
Yeah. So, hearing that it was a wheated product, I was anticipating something a little bit on the softer side, but I think this one has a little bit more nuance to it and a little bit more balance. So still the same kind of a corn note comes through. Is it the same white corn, Paul, that you use? Okay. Yeah. So I definitely picked that up. And then I get just a little bit of a gentle honey note, kind of similar to what you're picking up with the corn whiskey. And then it has a really nice kind of it's not a smoke, but it's a spice. I'm having trouble putting my finger on it, but almost a nutmeg or a coriander, something in the baking spice family on the back end that balances out that softness. So the one that, or the word that I would use to describe this one would be nuanced and then viscous. It is so stinking oily. It's just my whole palate's there, and I'm having trouble kind of putting flavor notes on it, but just very balanced and very viscous.
Chocolate covered raisin.
Yeah. You get a lot of darker raisiny prune fig notes with a lot of our particularly bourbons and all the stuff y'all were talking about in the corn whiskey. A lot of those flavors I think you're getting from, the barrel aging or the bourbon influence from the bourbon barrel as well. I call it old whiskey flavors because it doesn't taste like column distilled number 2 yellow dent corn whiskey like a lot of stuff. It's very much kind of, I call it a subgenre almost of American whiskey style.
You are obviously a Kentucky distillery, and in the land of Kentucky bourbon. And I think we're touching on some of the things that are partial answers to my question. But how do you stay true to the Kentucky bourbon heritage, but differentiate yourself from the Kentucky mega distillers?
Well, our world is so different from theirs. You go to a large distillery, or even what in Kentucky we might call a medium-sized distillery, and I mean it's a factory operation, and it needs to be when it gets to that size and that that level of capacity of just throughput of everything. And when I tell people we're like a bakery and a family farm, it's because there's 20 of us here total as far as employed and working, and everyone is tied to the operation for the most part and the location. Whereas the big distilleries, they have a distillery, they have a sales force, you know, they have all sorts of moving pieces like that. So it really is a different universe or world. And frankly, it's kind of easy in Kentucky, at least from my perspective, to get wrapped into all of the obvious evolution and growth of the industry. From the perspective of a small distiller, you know, we look at all of these operations that have continued to go in and build and continue to grow. And that's not what we are. We're not funded by an investment bank or a giant corporation. So we're just trying to make the style of whiskey that we're making and make it very well at a very high level, focusing on that process. How much we make is really based on what feels comfortable for us. We're not trying to compare ourselves to anyone else's production because just like I was alluding to in Kentucky, you can get real lost in that quickly and figure out that you're making a lot more barrels than maybe you intended to.
Yeah.
One of the things that you referenced earlier was use of pre-prohibition techniques and styles. Tell us a little bit about what that means in terms of how it affects what we're drinking here.
Well, kind of to set the table for that, and I know a lot of people are going to know this, but if they don't, it'll be good for them to hear it. And if they already know it, just to think through this for, you know, from a business standpoint, at least when I think about it, it blows my mind. But before Prohibition, you had over 200 distilleries in Kentucky, a lot of them small and medium-sized distilleries. You know, it was a healthy operating market compared to post-Prohibition, where basically a handful of large operations got a medicinal license and were started up shortly after Prohibition. But you always had this small group of a handful of distilleries making product in a very similar way, similar or the same equipment in some cases, a lot of similarities in the grain. And so when I look at whiskey production and history, it's almost like BCAD, before Prohibition, after Prohibition.
Right.
And the whiskey that we've been able to experience and drink is far different from a lot of the stuff that if you would have had access to stuff in the late 1800s, early 1900s. So as far as the techniques that the distilleries that have kept Kentucky distilling going, I mean, they are very large operations, but they've kept the industry going to where we can get to this point where we have this bourbon boom and everything like that. Yeah. They've been very similar as far as that production goes. And going back to pre-Prohibition techniques, I mean, the laws have technically changed, like the barrel entry proof, that was different. Before Prohibition, it was generally 110 or below, and obviously the law is now 125. So that's one thing. The other thing is we like to think that we get our barrels from a source that is going through more of that pre-Prohibition cooper or barrel making process. And Kelvin Cooperage is our cooper, and they do wood-fired barrels as opposed to gas-fired barrels. And that's how they would have been made, obviously, before Prohibition. They wouldn't have been on an assembly line with gas burners. It would have been more handmade with charcoal from the wood, from the white oak scraps from the process. And if you ever see Kelvin's operation, which is fascinating, that's how it's done. On top of that, the local white corn, that's definitely in the vein of pre-Prohibition. The pot distillation is a big part of that. But the after doing this as long as we have, the most important part of our pot distillation is the stripping run, not so much the spirits run, because the spirits run, you know, that's where we do our cuts with our heads, hearts, and tails and everything and get our product. But the stripping run is where you develop that pot distillation flavor. Just that slow, closed system cooking that happens. And you get a lot of that, the oiliness that you're describing, mouthfeel, body, all of that viscosity. a lot of that comes from the pot distillation. And then the low barrel entry proof, we go into the barrel at this point at around 103. It's like a range from this, 102, 103. And the second use barrels like the corn whiskey, we tend to go in at 102 because you're already working with a little bit of alcohol in that wood, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But and then the bottling it straight out of the barrel or unfiltered, or even like the Barker's Mill, it's cut but it's unfiltered. That's how you get all of these cool flavors that if you taste it straight out of the barrel, you're getting all the time. I mean, I was just talking to someone in the industry. I can't remember who the heck it was, but he and I were kind of lamenting on the fact that a lot of the whiskey, and people say, you get a 90 proof bottle of whatever, and then, someone says, add some water or it'll open it up. And my answer to that is, why are you adding water? They've already added plenty for you.
Right. Right.
Sure.
But I mean, our whiskey, the corn whiskey, and in this case, what we're tasting tonight, the dark fired bourbon, and any of our MB Roland whiskeys, that's never touched water. So you add water to that, it goes through chemical changes, chemical reactions that it's never done because it's never touched water before. So it really does change and evolve the flavor.
What about from a yeast standpoint? What do you use for yeast?
Well, I wish I could say I was using the original yeast used by someone else, 200 years ago or something like that. But frankly, our yeast is one that we kind of selected based on more so not being aggressive on the flavor development that you get with a lot of yeast fermentations. We wanted our grain to be kind of the stand-up main attraction of the flavor we're trying to build. So it's kind of, I call it a very vanilla whiskey. It is a whiskey yeast, and it has been used for whiskey for many years. I can't tell you historically if it was, Jedediah McCulloch's secret yeast jug or something like that. I don't know, but it's made specifically for whiskey, and it's meant to be kind of let that grain stand up and be the bone of the flavor.
It's almost a blue collar yeast in that it's there to do its job, and you're not looking for that yeast to necessarily be a flavor additive or a source of flavor in your whiskey.
Well, it's I don't want to say it's not a source of flavor. It's just not the defining flavor.
Okay.
Yeast is going to obviously affect your product no matter how you slice it. But in our case, we specifically chose this yeast because we didn't want, your super accelerated flavors that you can get from some yeasts that are going to just really give you wangs, if you will, that are a little, somewhat off-putting for some people in some cases, but you make some real interesting flavors. That's how we get some of the whiskeys we like.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, we're going to take a little commercial break here. And when we get done with that, we're going to come back with Paul. We're going to talk about the dark fired bourbon, and then we're going to talk with Paul about music. So right now, though, we talk at the front of every show about the Bar Cart Co-op, and we tell you what all that is about. Alan Bishop and I, about once a quarter, we'll do a special show. We'll have guests on. We'll cover a specific topic. We did a show where we talked about the stills at Stumpy Spirits and at Leopold Brothers Distillery. We did a show where we were talking about use of alternative grains. We've done a show on American single malt. Recently, we've done a couple of shows. One with Steve Beam, where we talked with him about his experimental rye collection there at Limestone Branch. If you've ever had any of those experimental ryes, you know how good those are. And then we did a show last week with Chris Koenig from Golden Beaver Distillery, where they have just released their first straight rye whiskey that they've ever produced. And they have a 2-year-old Pacific Flyway whiskey, which is a rice-based whiskey. So a couple of really good shows. If you are interested in those, just go to YouTube and search for Bar Cart Co-op, or you can find us on Facebook as well under Bar Cart Co-op. So we've got some fun stuff in the works. I've got a couple of ideas. Actually got an idea after sitting here and listening to Paul for a little while. So we may be able to try to coax Paul into doing a show with us again sometime soon. But so be sure to check that out. So Paul, tell us a little bit about the dark fired process.
Dark fired process. So whenever I got into whiskey, it was actually my first love was Scotch, but my bigger love, of course, is now bourbon or American straight whiskey. But that's where I kind of got fascinated with the process. And of course, in Scotland, you've got your kiln firing, your peat firing for malting, and you get those very distinctive flavors from that kilning process. And so in this particular area where we're again in Christian County, Kentucky, and kind of right around us, there's about another 10 counties on both sides of the state line, because we're right on the Tennessee line. We're about 2 miles from Tennessee. And these counties, if you do a little fun history Googling, you got it's known as the Black Patch. And it's because there's a specific type of tobacco that's grown and smoked or cured, fire cured here in this area. And you've got a lot of tobacco barns in this county and the other counties nearby. If you're driving around, particularly in the later summer and early autumn, you've got barns smoking all over the place. And you can tell when someone's not from the area, because if they call the fire department or they call 911, if there's a barn fire, that usually the person on the other end knows to ask, is it on fire or is it just smoking? But the barns that are smoking, they're curing or they're firing a specific type of tobacco that's grown here. It's called dark burley or dark fired tobacco, and that tobacco is grown in the field. It looks a little bit different than your traditional lighter burley tobacco that's used more so across the country. And that specific one is hung up and smoked in barns with sawdust and hardwood smoke, or it's all hardwood, produce sawdust and planks. And seeing and understanding this process and understanding and appreciating the whole kilning for Scotch, I said, well, wait a minute, we need to do something with this dark firing or this tobacco curing process where we can use that for a product that we make. So early on, we got a little batch of white corn, soaked it in some water, and stuck it in one of our neighbors' tobacco barns and smoked it in there whenever they were firing their tobacco, and kind of used that as a guinea pig and a test run for trying to figure out if it would work. And the result was perfect. I mean, the corn went from white to more of like a, coffee with cream looking color, nice lighter brown, and takes on all of that aroma from the smoking process. And so we now have replicated that, and we do a small amount internally here on site, which is one reason why we don't have a whole lot of this product, because it's fairly labor intensive to smoke the corn, as you might expect. But it's definitely something that's super unique. We'll smoke the corn for about a week, 3 different smokes, and it's a cold smoke. And it's just a small little barn structure that we smoke the corn in. just as much as we can based on the weather. Because if it's too windy, obviously it's not a good thing to have that going. But we smoke almost year round, with the exception of maybe a month or two, depending on the winter or excessive winds from springtime. A lot of times, and what we end up doing is once we have our smoked grain, we use a third of that grain in the dark fired bourbon mash, which is the same as our flagship bourbon: 78% white corn, 17% rye, 5% malt. But on the dark fired, a third of that grain is dark fired corn. It's the same white corn, but it's the smoked version.
Yeah. See, now this is the one that I finish with. If I'm reaching for this, I'm finishing my night with this. Now, that may be one pour. That may be, let's just say, more than one pour. But this is one, once I start on it, that's just what I want to stay with.
Yeah, you don't want to go. You don't want to go from dark fired bourbon to corn whiskey necessarily.
Right. But this is very unique, and I understand the nod to Scotch, and some people like peat, some people don't. If you do like peat, then this is a great bourbon to try. If you're a Scotch drinker, this is it. But if you're not a fan of peat, I would still say you need to try this, because it's a different kind of smoke that you're dealing with here. Yeah. Drew, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. I'm looking over the stats here on my phone. It's 113.6. Is that correct? Wow.
This one is, yeah.
So I appreciate so much that the heat from this does not come from the alcohol content, but from the grain itself. One of the things that we love to talk about is respecting the grain itself. And so I get that tobacco smoke, I get the corn influence, and I really get that oak in a way that complements both of the other two things. So I would say job well done. Just in terms of the influences that you were seeking after, I can perceive all of that in this glass.
I get like a peach note in there. Is that reasonable?
Yeah, that's reasonable.
I'm getting some fruit in that. I mean, again, you need to. This is one that you've got to sip a few times, and that's one of the beautiful things about it. One of the dangerous things about it is each time you sip it, you're going to pick up on something that's a little different, because it's very complex.
There's a lot going on because of the smoke. It really, frankly, I got to be in the mood, just like you're saying. When you drink that, that's all you want. Because sometimes I want bourbon flavored bourbon. Sometimes I want smoke flavored bourbon.
Yeah.
And just like you said, there's a lot going on with kind of the competing sides of the smoke, as well as your new charred oak flavors you get from aging.
Yeah. I've done a little lineup before with this and the peated batch that Buzzard Juice did with their rye, and with a Whiskey Del Box Dorado, which is a mesquite smoked single malt. That's a fun time because you're getting smoke from different sources, different types, and all of them are very well done. But you've got to be careful with what kind of lineup you put this in, because it'll affect what you're going after next.
Most definitely.
But
awesome.
This is fantastic.
It's special stuff. Paul, I know we got to talk to you about music, but if you were gonna do some culinary pairings with this,
Mm.
where would you go? Because I can see it being great with grilled fruit. I can see it being great with some pork ribs, something like that. What do you pair this one with if you're at home fixing dinner?
Well, probably the most fitting thing for that is going to be some barbecue from Western Kentucky because it's got a lot of the same influence with those hardwood smoke notes that are coming from the smoking process. But and that's how I describe the smoke that you get in that. It's more barbecue and less of that earthy heat that you get from Scotch.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the barbecue is or some kind of smoked grilled meat of some sort for me personally. Just anything smoked.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Add a cigar. You might as well have a giant smoke party and have a cigar. I don't smoke many
Hell
cigars,
yeah.
but I'll smoke one with that.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Any particular artist or record or anything like that you'd pair this one with?
Johnny Cash, Man in Black. That's where this one probably wants to live.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that fits. I think that fits.
Yeah. Well, I was trying to segue you there, Kevin.
Yeah, no, it's a good segue because we want to dig into some music here, and I'll continue to sip on this dark fired bourbon. We see how much is that. Yeah, I'm safe. I won't finish that bottle tonight. At least I better not. This show will go down in history. All right, so Paul, we want to talk music with you a little bit. Do you remember the first concert that you ever went to?
Yeah, well, okay. So growing up in the New Orleans area, a lot of music festival type of events and everything. So it was let's call it a music fest of some sort in the city park there. And I want to say that the headliner was Cowboy Mouth. So that's telling you, my generation and in music and everything. And ironically, I'm fine with Cowboy Mouth, but but as I grew up, I realized it's not that I didn't like a lot of music; it's that I'm just not a child of my generation because I'm not a fan of most '90s music, or at least pop music, rock, that type of stuff, and early 2000s. So I tend to lean more so on classic rock and country and blues and anything that you might hear in New Orleans that's good as far as music goes. Just anything that's fun, jazz type of music that I've heard all the time in the area. I remember going to Saints games as a kid, and you got your brass bands everywhere playing. And I've been to other NFL games, and I'm like, yeah, y'all are hilarious. You don't have no idea what a party time. But it's if you haven't gone to a Saints game at the Superdome, even if you're not a huge football fan, it is an experience.
Yeah, I would say now when you were going to Saints games, was this when they were starting to be good, or was this when they were still pretty bad?
They were starting to understand how to go to the playoffs, and that was about it. Yeah, okay. But they didn't get really good until after I was gone and my way for the most part.
So this is pre Drew Brees, Sean Payton era, then, right?
Definitely. Yeah.
So was this was it Bum Phillips that was coaching there, or was it just Wade?
No, actually, the best coach of my childhood would have been Jim Mora.
Okay.
Playoffs. Don't tell me about playoffs. He coached the Saints before he went to the Colts.
Before he went to the Colts, yes. Yeah, that's awesome. Do you remember your first album that you ever bought?
I honestly don't. I remember one of my first albums was ironically a Michael Jackson album, which I'm great with Michael Jackson, and I bought one of his older albums because I was like, well, this looks more interesting. And now when I look back on it, that's the music I like more of his is some of his older stuff from Off the Wall and of course Thriller and everything.
Yep. No, that's prime Michael Jackson as far as I'm concerned. So, do you associate anything from your love of music and what you enjoy there to what you're doing in distillation, whether it's you like to have a certain type of music playing in the distillery, or you get inspired by music when you're preparing to run the still or create a mash bill or anything like that?
No, well, yes and no, actually. Yes, in that kind of our environment area, you've got, because we're so close to Nashville, you by default have a lot of ties to country music and bluegrass and stuff like that in this area. And I love all of that music. It's not all I listen to, but it's definitely a healthy chunk of it. And it seems to kind of fit. But, I mean, probably a house favorite for kind of pop groups here would be Hall & Oates.
Yep.
Yeah. Hall & Oates is one of our favorites.
You just got reintroduced to.
That's right. Mary Beth's over here commenting because early on when we started the distillery, we were offered a free Hall & Oates CD by Uline, and I turned it down. I turned it down because I didn't quite know who Hall & Oates were. I mean, I was familiar with the music without knowing what the music was.
Right.
When I found out who they were, I'm like, man, I should have got that CD.
It's until you really start thinking about it and just kind of playing through some of their songs, you don't realize how many hits Hall & Oates had. And nobody really knows what Oates did, but he was there.
He was there.
He was there. He was part of it. So is Mary Beth a big Hall & Oates fan then?
Oh, I think it's a job requirement. If you work here, you kind of need to appreciate Hall & Oates.
Okay.
It's become that way.
No, I just like needling him. Paul, whenever I get the chance to prove Paul wrong on something, it's my duty as a wife. I have to poke fun sometimes.
Yeah. Or let me ask you this question, and I hope this doesn't get you in trouble, Paul. Do you remember? Is there a song that you and Mary Beth have that would be, hey, this is our song, or this was the first song we danced to at our wedding, or something of that nature?
Well, yeah, we have it, but we can't. Neither of us, both of us are shaking our head, going, "I have no idea." No, we don't have a song. No.
Yeah. Do you remember?
The distillery takes all our money songs.
Do you remember the first concert that the two of you went to together?
We went to
Tootsie's 50th.
Yeah, we went to Tootsie's, which if y'all, know, for those that are not country music,
very
fans,
familiar.
It's a very famous bar establishment on Broadway in downtown Nashville. Very historic, right over by the original Ryman Auditorium. Mm-hmm. That was a church beforehand. And by the way, if you go to Nashville and you go to a show, go to the Ryman, the old Ryman. Don't go to the new Ryman because there's not a bad seat in the old Ryman. It's fantastic. But we went to the 50th anniversary for Tootsie's. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it was just a revolving door of all sorts of people there. I did get to see Chris Christopherson, so I was very excited about that because he was an Army guy before he went and took the plunge into songwriting. He was actually a Rhodes Scholar. He was a helicopter pilot, and ironically, he was going to be an instructor at my alma mater at the U.S. Military Academy, but that's when he decided to get out of the military and pursue songwriting in that career.
That's pretty neat. Maybe Paul, you can tell me if this is folklore or not, but I heard a rumor or a legend, I guess, a couple months ago that there are only 3 people that have been discharged from the United States military service to pursue music, and it's Elvis Presley, Chris Christopherson, and Zach Bryan. Do you know any truth to that, or is that just,
I don't know. No, I don't. And
okay.
Everyone's stories are what I've learned in the military is what happened and what really happened when it comes to stuff like that. It sometimes depends on who's telling the story or how they understood how it happened.
That sounds
Heard
good,
loud and
though.
clear. Yeah,
sounds good.
that's cool.
We'll call it good. We'll call it.
It
true.
sounds like it's solid to me, right?
Yeah. Chris Christopherson's one of the great songwriters of our lifetime.
Yeah, he's fantastic. In the Highwaymen with Johnny Cash, so that fits. So what if we got in the vehicle with you and just driving around? What are we going to be listening to as we're going?
Well, you're going to listen to Hall and Oates. But probably Johnny Cash, Waylon Jennings. I like to throw other things in there, blues and type of stuff as well.
Yeah.
But just a lot of different country things. I like Jerry Reed a lot. I like his kind of play on his lyrics that he does.
And if you're in the car with me, it's gonna be Beastie Boys.
So
all right.
Mary Beth wants Beastie Boys. Okay. Every now and then we'll listen to that. Yeah. Yeah, we move around the spectrum a little bit. I mean, it's not necessarily one thing, but we go to a lot of the same music, go back to the same things. We had, truth be told, we used to have concert events at our distillery back before COVID, way back before COVID. And we had events out here. We had 2,500 people multiple times, and acts that would come up from Nashville and play. And it's so music is kind of tied into our property like crazy when it comes to that kind of stuff. And we'll still have someone come out here and play some music here and there for little events that we have. I got to shamelessly plug our Stavesman program. If anyone has any interest, that's something you can join. And basically, we have a few specific events a couple times a year for those individuals that are, just kind of hanging out here at the distillery. Hey, try this, taste this kind of thing. And it's a fun little deal because you get 15% off if you buy anything from us, from the tasting room for the rest of your life. So that's a nice benefit. But
they get to do a barrel pick every year.
Yeah, we'll do a barrel pick
and
all sorts of fun stuff. And it's evolving. We had a pig roast in May. It was quite nice.
Wow. Oh, that's fantastic. I'll have to get in on that. I'm just looking at your website now. Okay, good. Yeah, I'll do that as soon as we're done. So, do you remember the last concert you saw?
I think that was still Tootsie's.
Was it Tootsie's? Well, other than our own that we put on here.
Yeah.
I guess.
In order to go to concerts,
well, no.
a light.
No. I know the concert now. Okay, I know the concert now. It was KC and the Sunshine Band.
Oh, that was not a ticketed concert, though. That's not the same.
We were slinging drinks for that one.
That's awesome.
We were dressed up. We were decked out. It was nice.
We need pictures of that.
We do. We need to be like putting pictures on the corner right
I have
here.
pictures. If he wants them, I can send them.
Yes,
please send them.
Platform
Please.
Shoes and everything, man. It was great.
Yeah, send the pictures. I'll edit them into the show.
I was like 6'5". I've never been that tall in my life.
Oh.
The pictures. tell him I'm about to.
You're about to get the pictures, just so you know.
Oh, awesome! All right, well, we'll work them in here in just a minute. Then that's great. No,
They actually played here locally in Hopkinsville last year,
yeah,
and it was neat. It was cool. I mean, because our little town, and there was a lot of people at that concert. It was impressive.
no, I mean, they were it when I was a little kid, and that's been a minute. But the fact that they're still going, is pretty amazing. And
72 years old is what he is.
Oh, and he sounded great.
And he
too.
sounded fantastic, and he did a really good job. I was like, 72, good golly.
Oh, that's amazing. Are you any plans to restart concerts and such at the distillery?
Mary Beth, what?
No, we're too busy with actual making the bourbon. The making the bourbon comes first.
The making the bourbon. All
making the bourbon's more important, but bourbon and whiskey. It's I'm not going to say never or no, but we don't have any plans right now to restart concerts. Frankly, there's starting to be enough in our local area. With that one was in Hopkinsville, and we've got another concert right down the road in Oak Grove in a week for that
it's on
festival.
Saturday, actually. It's not even a week.
So I mean, there's a lot of great opportunities. Being this close to Nashville, we're spoiled when it comes to having access to the resources, and it's not just the singers or the bands; it's everything. It's the talent, it's the sound people, it's the fact that anyone that comes over here, they sleep in their own bed if they're doing something. So we get a lot. Leonard Skinner played down the road a few days ago. I mean, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Is there anything from a music standpoint that you said you like into classic rock as well? Anything in that genre that sticks with you now?
Well, I already said it. Actually, Leonard Skinner is probably one of my favorite bands overall. I mean, I can listen to Leonard Skinner no matter what mood I'm in at any point. And it's just to me good kind of middle of the road music, whether it be rock or kind of leans country or southern rock, however you want to say that, and blues, very blues influenced, obviously. But that's probably one of my favorite bands as far as hearing the songs, and here we've heard them.
Eagles,
the Eagles too, but I mean me more so Leonard Skinner, but the Eagles are great. If you haven't been to Winslow, Arizona, it's a fun little stop. They've got their little standing on the corner thing going on there. It's kind of nice with the 59 Chevy, I guess. No, I'm sorry, not Chevy, Ford.
It's a Ford, yes.
The Ford. But it's just kind of that running around on the road. We do a lot of driving now, Mary Beth and I, because we sell our product in so many markets. We're always going to a place to obviously promote product and go see accounts and things like that. So, I mean, we're driving a lot and we enjoy it. We do, but we like that kind of road music that kind of moves you along as you're going down the road. And since we do a little business out west, we're out there in those deserty kind of western states. And for us, that's like going in a different universe, because it's everything over here east of the Mississippi is green and we got rain and everything like that. So it's like going to a foreign country in a neat way, in a fun way, going out there.
Yeah, I was out in Arizona about a month ago, and it is like a different planet, but that's the beauty of our country, is you can taken a lot of different things and a lot of different places, and it's all still home. So do you play music? You ever played instruments, sang in choir or in a band or anything like that?
I can read music. I grew up, did a little piano playing, I guess, to learn music as a young kid, and then I played saxophone in the band for a few years, but it didn't stick with me for high school. And it's so I appreciate music, and when I've had enough to drink, I can sing. At least I think I can.
Well, I've got video of that too. Ask him if he'd like it.
No, don't send that.
Mary Beth, we'll take whatever you send us. So.
He actually got on stage with Casey and the Sunshine Band too.
Holy crap!
Yeah, he did. I just sent you the photo, but I do have.
Well, I wasn't really on stage with them. It wasn't.
Oof.
I don't want to make it sound like I was performing with them or anything like that.
I think we need proof. I think we'll decide.
Oh, well, hang on. It's coming.
Y'all might get some form of proof here.
Okay, hang on.
We got the
my
exclusive.
goodness.
Oh, that's awesome.
He's got. They should have the photo.
Hang on just a second. This is worth the wait, people.
Breaking news.
She's trying to send it.
Oh no, I want to listen to make sure.
Oh, that's it.
Oh, there you go.
There we go.
Oh my goodness.
This is not me with him, but I do have the video. It's coming.
She's sending y'all the video.
That is
Okay.
that is fantastic.
That's Mary Beth on the left.
That's some platform shoes, man.
That's what? Say it again, Paul.
That's Mary Beth on the left, and that's Vanessa on the right. Vanessa's kind of our. You want to know how Mary Beth and I stay sane and are successful being a married couple and running a business? It's because of Vanessa right there on the right. So.
That's fantastic. I was going to ask what it's like to run a business such as you do as a married couple.
It kind of seems second nature at this point, and I guess that's a good thing. Yeah. And our biggest thing is we've done a really good job. I guess we know when to shut up. And going back to Vanessa, she's been working for us for a few years, but we've known her for about 20 years. Mm-hmm. She's like a sister to me, like a sister to Mary Beth as well. So I mean, it was almost like hiring a family member.
Yeah.
Or really was actually. I've known her children since they were little babies, and now they're adults. You know, it's
yeah,
really neat. But we just kind of understand when to say, okay, let's talk about this. Let's figure out what we need to do. Certain things in particular, Mary Beth manages. She has a banking background, so she manages the finances as you would expect, but she does a far better job than me. And then on top of that, she gets all the jobs that are not fun. So she's financial, she's HR, she's marketing's fun, so that's a fun job.
I just need to do more of that.
You get fun job. Yeah, you just don't get to do marketing as much as you want. And then of course, but we really manage everything together. We utilize each other's strengths and experiences, because at this point, we've been around the block a few times. We don't know everything, but we can usually figure out what we need to do if something comes up. Mm-hmm. And we've got really good people at this point in the distillery. So, I mean, I keep talking about Mary Beth and I, but we've got 20 people that work here. And that's how the distillery runs. It's not because of me necessarily or Mary Beth. It's because of we've got people running the distillery, people running the bottling side, which is obviously just as important in a lot of ways. and we just promoted one of our distillers to blending tasting, and I jokingly say her name's Gretchen Wessels. She has the job. Everyone who visits a distillery and they're looking around and they see all this grain and it's getting turned into whiskey, and they see these barrels and you smell the angel share and you see this whiskey getting bottled, and then you go and you taste this stuff and it's fantastic. And everyone who's doing that process, if they go visit a distillery, they're like, man, I want to be a taster. I want to be that's all I want to do is taste whiskey. And that's kind of what her job is. I say she's got the unicorn job, because that's what everyone thinks in their head, but it's still a job, frankly. And but it's a lot of management when you're talking about the amount of samples that you have to process,
Sure,
and taste, and dedicate them to what they are going to be, and then putting blends together, which is obviously going to be based on production needs and everything. So
yeah,
it's a fun little business now with departments and moving parts, and it's really kind of starting to stand up on its own. But I tell people, when you're filling barrels, and we've always filled our own barrels. We've never sourced anything. We've always filled our own barrels and waited on it to age. But when you're filling your own barrels, you're running a Ponzi scheme, waiting to let that stuff age and turn into more capability to fill more barrels or to do whatever you need to with the business. And in some ways, I sit there and I go, we're basically hitting 15-year mark at this point, and it feels like it's been a while. But then on the other hand, it's almost like things are just kind of getting started in a lot of ways.
Yeah. So 15 years will be next year. Any big celebration plans or anything in store?
Mary Beth?
We haven't started on that yet. Thanks.
That's on the
putting that on
to-do
my
list.
to-do
It's on
list.
the to-do list.
Do I need to talk with the marketing director?
Maybe I may change clothes and put on a different hat.
Yeah.
All right. We'll kind of start wrapping things up here for the show, but I do want to ask, is there anything else that you want to make sure we can tell people about, or anything that you'd like to promote for yourselves or the distillery?
Just basically come out and visit us. That's the best thing to do to learn about us. You take a tour of our operation, you'll understand who we are.
Mm-hmm.
And like you were alluding to earlier when we were talking, I mean, we've got, I cannot tell you right now how many products we have in our tasting room, but it's probably like 25 or 30 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you've got everything from some one-off whiskeys we do to some single barrel picks and things like that. It's really a fun little adventure. And can you think of anything else?
Yeah, absolutely.
All the social media stuff?
Absolutely can.
But that I have nothing to do with whatsoever.
Yeah, you can find us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook under MB Roland Distillery. Also, if you can't come to the distillery, please do join us for any of the social media events that we have going on.
Mm-hmm.
Ask for us at your local liquor store. We just appreciate the exposure.
Yeah, if you're trying to get our product and need to, just contact us. We'll see if we can help you out on that. But we are definitely a guerrilla marketing operation. I mean, you're looking at a big part of the marketing, Mary Beth as well, and we've got some other folks that get involved in it. But I mean, we are very grassroots. It's just us getting out there doing things. Yep. So when it comes to getting our product, we realize it's not in every state or every market, but we might be, whether you realize it or not, because we're getting into some new markets. We're getting into Florida. We just got into Florida just a few weeks ago. We're getting into Maryland and Washington, D.C., as well as the Houston area. So
great.
It's a fun process, fun evolution that we're getting to start to experience at this point.
Yeah. Well, anything that we can do to help promote along the way, we're certainly happy to do that. And we'll certainly share everything that we can on our social media platform that you guys have going on. And certainly want to plan a trip down to meet you guys in person really soon. So, but again, you can find Paul and Merry Beth and their whole team at mbroland.com and at MB Roland Distillery on Instagram and Twitter, and MB Roland on Facebook. Be sure to check that out. And I'm going to get involved with the Stavesman program now, so you can join me in doing that too. So, Drew, where can people find you, sir?
Yep, absolutely. I am on Instagram and Threads now that's a thing, at drew.crawley63, and then drewcrawleymusic.com. That's the most up-to-date places that you can find tour dates and live music, kind of chances to come out and see me. And then new record coming out in November. So I would be honored and appreciative if you would follow along on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, wherever you listen to records or new music. Check me out there. And then if you follow along or subscribe, you will have a new record coming in just a couple months.
Fantastic. And for our show, you can watch this show on YouTube. And if you don't want to watch it, you prefer to listen, you may be during your morning commute, you can listen to us on your favorite podcast platform, as long as that's Apple or Spotify or Google. We have a Facebook page where we release all of our shows. We have a Facebook group where folks will come on and they'll talk to us about what music they're listening to that night and what they may be drinking. I can tell you I've got some Johnny Cash and some MB Roland Dark Fired coming soon as a deck pour. So, hey, and Drew, tell everybody who we've got coming up next.
Yeah, we got my good buddy Neil Johnstone coming up on the podcast next week. Neil is a local singer-songwriter. He is a mail carrier by day and a incredibly gifted musician by night. He's a member of the Monarch Music and Arts community here in town that you've heard us talk about before. You'll hear us talk about again. Tune in next time to hear us talk about Neil and what he's got coming up as well.
Yeah, that'll be fun to talk with him, and he's kind of got a music mission, if you will, in what he's doing. And we want to make sure you get one more look at this fantastic picture. My goodness, that made my day. I love it. I love it. Because Paul, just sit here and I look at you, and then I see this, and it's like, this is awesome. I appreciate the boldness in doing that, and I appreciate even more Mary Beth sending it to us. But Paul, thank you very much for being on with us. Mary Beth, we'll have to do this again and have you on camera as well. But we appreciate your input to the show. It's been a lot of fun.
She already quit. She's gone. She left.
She's gone. I give her an assignment on this 15-year anniversary thing, and so she's out getting started early on that, I guess. So. At any rate, we do appreciate you being on with us, Paul. I know that your time is very important, very precious, and we do appreciate you spending some of that with us.
Thank y'all for having me again. Thank you.
Absolutely. Hope to do it again sometime soon. But on behalf of Paul and Drew and Mary Beth, who's now absent, until next time, cheers, love, and free bird. Good night, everybody.